Here in the playback menu, we're going to have a lot of things that aren't too exciting, but there might be a few things that you do find interesting in here. Let's go ahead and dive on in. First up is protecting images in here. You can select images to kind of put a very weak lock on them so they don't get deleted. The cards can still be formatted, the cards can be lost, the camera can be lost. So it's not the greatest protection, but it can be done in here if you need to. Next up is erasing images. Generally, from a safety precaution, you shouldn't be deleting images on a card in some cases. If you do want to delete them, there is a garbage can button on the back of the camera. That's a little bit faster for individual images. But if you wanted to delete, say, more than 10 images, it's faster to come in here on the erase images, where you just simply check all the ones that you want off, and then you hit erase once. There's a lot of button pressing when you do the garbage can button on the back of the camera, and this will enable you to do it more quickly if you do want to do it with a lot of images. If you do need to rotate your images because they're not being portrayed on the back of the camera correctly and you want to do a little slideshow, or you're hooking your camera up to a larger monitor to showcase your images, you may need to do that here. In most cases, you'll never need to touch this feature. You can also change the movie rotation information. Somehow, vertical video has become a thing now, and in some cases, if you want to play back a video that was shot vertical, intended to be vertical, you could come in here and rotate it so that it plays on your vertical screen appropriately. Next up is rating. If you want to rate your images, you can do so in here. When I first saw this, I kind of thought it was a dumb feature to have. Shouldn't you be doing that in your external software program? And then I seen that in some cases you're sitting in an airport, you're waiting for a ride, you're done shooting your event, you have nothing to do but to go through and look at your images. Might as well get a jump start on the editing process. All of these are attributed to the metadata, which carries forward to most all software programs afterwards. So it's just helping you get a head start on your culling process. If you have images on one memory card and you want to transfer them to another, if somebody else has a card and they want copies of particular photographs, you can go in here and facilitate that change. It's not very common, but it's possible for you to hook your camera up to an external printer directly without a computer. And if you go in here, you can go through the various parameters of getting the appropriate size and print set to the machine. Maybe one of the least used features in this camera is the photo book setup. And this is where you can work with software from Canon to set up a picture album, and you get to choose images which are in your picture album, which you can then put together on the Canon EOS utility software. All right, next up, page 3, raw processing. So if you have a raw image and you want to make a JPEG image out of it, you can do so in here. In fact, let's do it right now, because there are some kind of fun options that you can play around with in here. So let's go ahead and dive into the menu, and hopefully we've taken some raw images. So we're going to go up to page 3 of the playback menu, the raw processing, and we're going to select an image, and we're going to save those for a little bit later. Let's go ahead and save this image here. This one's got a bit of a problem. It's got a little bit of an overexposure. I believe we were playing with bracketing in this particular one, but this might be good just to experiment with things. So we're going to hit the set button. We want to play around with this one. We're going to hit the Q and OK. We could use the settings that we shot with, or we could set up processing with a JPEG, which is what I want to do. I want to see if I can make some adjustments on this. So I press the OK button, and I can now go through and, let's see, use the joystick here to control a whole bunch of different features. And it's actually this first one, the brightness. If I want to turn the brightness down on this particular image, because I purposely overshot it, we can bring this down by 1 stop. Kind of wish I could come more than that, but you know, we'll do what we can. White balance seems fine. Picture settings are fine. Clarity, let's just say we want to sharpen it up a little bit. We can do that. Auto lightening is fine. We can come over here and now save this particular image as a new file. So we started with the raw. We darkened it by a stop. We fixed a lot of that overexposure problem on this image. And do we want to continue processing? No, we're going to be done on this one. Let's go view the processed image. So here is the processed image. If I hit the info button, you can see we now have a large JPEG on here. It used to be a raw image. And so if you do have a raw image, you can tweak it, you can adjust it a bit. It's a very weak version of Photoshop right in your camera. But if you do need a JPEG out of the camera and you want to make just a few little adjustments, yeah, you can do it. All right, next up is dual pixel raw processing. And we talked a little bit about the dual pixel process. It had a lot of interesting things that it could do, not always that practical. Well, these are kind of interesting as well. One is portrait relighting. And the idea with this one is that if you took a portrait where the face was a little bit darker than you would like it to be, you can increase the lightness because the camera can recognize the face, and being a raw image, it can lighten it up. You can also, with background clarity, make it a little bit sharper in the background if you want to see what's in the background. It's not a lot of change, but it's a little bit of change. So let's go in and play with this. I did take a couple of photos in the last break. I'm going to go ahead and play back. And we've got a couple of images here. And I just kind of, out of curiosity, I wanted to see if it worked with the cat face, because it normally recognizes faces. So let's just find this out together. So DP raw processing, dual pixel raw processing. We're going to try portrait relighting. And it does not recognize this image because it doesn't have the set there. Let's go, okay, to her picture, it sees it. So now we're going to press set. And so now it's going to go into this process where we can adjust the raw processing, very similar to what we did just a moment ago. But we have a new option down here called portrait relighting. It's currently turned off. We're going to press this and turn it on. And what it's going to do is it's going to brighten her face. Now we have a few different controls that we can see down here. We can control how much brightness on her face, low, medium, and high. We'll leave it on high for the moment. And you can use the magnifying button to change how far out it spreads. You can get it more to the middle, spreads out a little bit, spreads out a lot. Let's go to the middle here. Now, this is where it gets really weird, and it's a little bit limited on what it's doing right now because I'm taking a picture of a two-dimensional subject. It works a little bit better on a real person rather than a photograph of a real person, is that you can use the joystick and you can move the lighting around the frame on her face a little bit. It's not a huge amount, but you can choose to light one side of her face a little bit more than the other side of her face. So I'm going to go ahead and move it more over to this left side of the frame. And then I'm going to press set. And then I am going to bring this over to the save function. Hit OK, and we're going to save it as a new file. It's saving that as frame number 1916. I'm going to say OK, and I'm going to go back to playback, hit info, and I believe that is the original image. And I've taken a couple of images. Here's the relit one, which looks a little too bright in the face here. And I'm going to just delete this image here so that we can go back and forth between the original and the relit one. Now this is a terrible case or a terrible application of this because I've already lit the subject in the studio. I've already adjusted this particular image afterwards, and so it didn't need relighting. But on a subject that does need relighting, it is something that could work. I don't know that it's the way that I would recommend working, but it's a tool. You can use it if necessary. If you are shooting with the dual pixel RAW and you do want to make an image in camera, you can do it, and that's how it's done. All right, moving on. Resize. This is the wrong name. This is downsize, because if it was resize, we could go up as well as down. This should be called downsizing because we take large JPEG images, which are 45 megapixels, and we can reduce them down to 22, 12, or 3.8, which might be necessary for certain reasons. Normally, you're going to use an external computer for this, but yeah, you can do it in the camera with JPEG images. Next up is cropping. And so once again, you're able to have a weak version of Photoshop or any manipulation program of your choice here in the camera. Let's go ahead and dive in. Some of these controls are a little on the goofy side in here, and so I'm bound to make some mistakes in here. So let's go ahead and play back an image. Let's see if we can find the cat image. There we go. Let's play with the cat image, see if we can zoom in on the eyes and get a cropped image of the eyes. And so what we're going to do is go back into the menu here. We're going to come on over to cropping, which is right down here on the third page. Press the set button. We need to find the correct image, which is... All right, so we're going to hit menu. We're going to hit cropping. We're going to hit set. You can see down here where it says set. And in here, what we're going to do is we're going to dial this to choose the size of the crop. And let's see if we can move it around. We're going to crop in on Kitty over here. Now what we can do is turn the back dial, and that changes along the selection along the top. We could straighten this, but I think it's pretty straight to begin with. Now, as far as the aspect ratio, we could say, you know what, let's get a square out of this, and let's come in a little bit more and crop this out right there. All right, so now I'm going to dial over to crop and save. I'm going to hit set, and that's my new file, and I'm going to hit OK for that. And there's the new number. When I hit playback, if I bring up my info, dial to the end of our collection of images here, somewhere in here, there's our cat photo, and there's our cat crop photo. It took a little while to get there, but that is how you can crop an image and get it straight out of the camera. All right, next up, you can change your HEIF to JPEG images in camera if you want. If you find that you have a program that doesn't work with the HEIF and this is the only place you can transfer it, well, it's one way of transferring that image. All right, next up is slideshow. So if you are going to hook your camera up to a TV and do a slideshow, you can set the parameters for it in here. Setting the image search conditions. So if you've taken a lot of pictures, you've been traveling for weeks on end or days and you shoot lots of photos, you can search for images that you have rated or protected or put in specific folders or taken on particular dates. Helps you just find images when you have a really large collection on a memory card. The magnification I would change to actual size. That way when you're playing back an image and you zoom in, it will actually show you actual size, kind of pixel for pixel, a magnification. You can choose another number if you want, but this is the one that's best for judging sharpness on an image. Image jump with the dial. So on the front of the camera, the main dial can be used for jumping through a large collection of images very quickly. And so you can set as to what it looks for in its jump. And so a lot of times it's easiest to have it in 10 images. That way you can use the back dial to jump one image at a time and then use the top dial to jump 10 so that you can go more quickly. One time I did have the camera set up to look for rated images because I had gone to shoot an event and there was images that I was kind of star rating as I went along that were better images for the event. And I shot about 1,000 photos in this event, but there was, about 20 really good images that I wanted to share with people. And what I was able to do was I was able to star rate the images, give the camera to the people and say, turn this dial, and you'll go to those 20 best images and see them. And so it was a quick way for me to look like a great photographer who only took 20 photos during the day, but it also saved them a lot of time going through a lot of the other shots just to find the ones that they wanted to find. If you wanted to switch the dials as far as that mode dial versus the main dial on the camera, you could change which ones they operate versus the single advance versus the jumping advance. The rate button on the back of the camera can be altered. Normally, you would have it in the hold position for recording a memo. If you want to play images back and hear the recording, you need to change this to the play memo option. You can also have it set to erase images if you want to move the erase button on the camera. So a couple different options you can look at in there. If you are recording an audio quality or an audio message on there, you can change the quality, which will have a little impact on the size. It's pretty small when it comes to file size compared to photos, but it'll adjust the quality and the size on the memory card. Onto the 5th page of the playback menu, you have your playback information display. There is that long scrolling display that I showed you earlier in the class. And if you find some of those screens not useful and you don't want to waste your time going by those screens, you can uncheck those boxes in here. So I encourage you to take a close look and see if they're of value to you, and if not, uncheck those boxes. Highlight Alert will show you pixels that are overexposed in the playback screen. And so this is something that you generally leave turned off, but if you are concerned about highlights that have gotten too bright, good reason to turn this on to make sure that you are getting the right exposure. The AF point display will show you the focus points that the camera was accessing when it took the photo. Generally, this is really disruptive when trying to review and look at photos, but it can also be very helpful in trying to figure out what the camera is doing. In the previous section, we were talking about all the autofocus controls and trying to figure out where was the camera trying to focus and was it trying to focus on the right subject. And so if you found that your subjects are not in focus, this would be a good thing to turn on to look at those photos while they're in the camera and see what was the camera trying to do, and is there an adjustment with the camera that you can make. And so generally I would leave this turned off. It might be good for beginners to kind of see where the camera is putting the focusing system, or if you're having focusing issues that you need to kind of keep an eye on. The playback grid is the same grid that we've talked about in the viewfinder, only it just turns it on in the playback. So you can check your composition and alignment for images here. The movie play count will show you either the recording time or the time code when you are playing back your movies. Your choice in there. If you are going to be connecting your camera up via the HDMI port to an HDR TV, you can turn that on and then the camera will know what type of connection is being made. All right, folks, there you go. That's your playback menu. Hopefully you've discovered a few things that you'll be able to find and make use of in the future.